I eagerly took the wheel, dodging another move from the car chasing me. The windshield cracked as the first shot pierced the body. It was night, a full moon, but the roads to the house looked much darker than usual. My heart pounded in a frantic rhythm, blood rushing in my ears. Just a few minutes ago, I had been thinking about how to explain my late return to Grace. Now, all I could think about was how not to end the day with a bullet in the back of my head. The car behind me kept a steady pace, no headlights on, only the flashes of gunfire from its window silhouetting the pursuer. They knew I was their target, and they were ready to take me out. Easy, Mark, I thought to myself, leaning lower to avoid being an easy mark. My right hand instinctively reached for the glove compartment. Damn, this wasn't my usual ride. My gun wasn't here. The woods along the road seemed like my only chance. I turned the steering wheel sharply and swerved onto a narrow dirt path. The car bounced and howled as I took control, slumping into the seat. The pursuer slowed, apparently not expecting me to venture into such a thicket. Just a little longer, I muttered, my heart pounding with excitement. Then, to my amazement, I heard the muffled sound of an engine coming from the woods. There were two of them. I jumped out of the car, barely managing to stop it at the edge of a cliff. Grabbing my phone, I sent a text. *activate safe protocol. Threat to my life. Location being transmitted. 30 seconds later, my car was already ablaze. I hid behind the trees, watching as two men in black jumped out of their vehicles. They surveyed the scene, but I was already deeper into the woods, hiding behind thick spruce trees. They weren't hunting an ordinary man. They were after someone who hadn't forgotten his skills yet. I clenched my fists, ready to take on any challenge. I was determined to figure out who they were, what they wanted, and why they were targeting me. But one thing was certain. My peaceful life was about to take a thrilling new turn. I moved through the forest, staying low and quiet, following the sounds of the night wind. My skills, honed over decades, responded instantly as I listened intently to every sound. I recognized the crunch of twigs under their feet. They were following the trail, searching the area. "Where is he?" one of them said, his voice low and husky. "His car's burned out, but there's nobody." "He must be around here somewhere," said the other, tall and confident, with a slight accent. I fumbled in my pocket for a key piece of my retirement arsenal, the compact knife I always kept with me. My years of peaceful life in a private company had not made me complacent. I took up a position on a knoll to watch them. They spread out, searching the neighborhood. It was crucial to keep them separated. The first one was walking straight toward me, picking his way through the bushes. I paused, waited for the opportune moment, then lunged behind him. With a swift and decisive move, I plunged the knife beneath his ribs. His body went limp, and I laid him gently on the ground. "Are you there?" the other man shouted when he heard the noise. "Yes, I'm checking," I said, imitating the dead man's voice. He fell silent, believing me. I moved closer to where his shadow played in the trees. Tom was working against me. I knew that if I didn't take them out now, reinforcements would arrive faster than I could figure out who was behind this. I made a circle, coming in from the other side. He was standing with his back to me, looking around nervously. With a swift and decisive move, I disarmed him, and in that moment, he lost consciousness. I laid him down next to the tree and quickly searched his pockets. I found a cell phone, and the screen flashed with a half-written text. Asterisk target eliminated. Location coordinates. I closed my eyes, digesting what was happening. They were on the lookout for me, but not for theft or murder. This was targeted elimination, and it was coming from someone who knew too much about me. Taking out my phone, I activated the encrypted line of communication. Rick, it's Mark. I'm in trouble. Someone knows more about me than they should. Send people out and check the database for possible leaks. The phone rang. Mark, are you all right? The voice on the other end was surprised but quickly recovered. We're in contact. We've got the coordinates. Do you have a place to hide? We're close. We'll chat more about what's next when we meet up, I said, ending the call with a smile. The forest, silent and still, seemed to be waiting for my next move. I knew I had to move. When I emerged from the forest and made my way to one of the old cars I'd left behind in case of emergencies, the goal of my peaceful life in the suburbs with Grace was already looming in front of me. Everything that had happened couldn't have been an accident. Grace. I smiled, remembering her latest quirks, distant calls, attempts to hide text notifications, and this sudden craving for privacy that she'd never complained about before. At home, I pulled into the garage, quiet as always. The house lights were on. Grace was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. You're so late, she said, smiling warmly. Business, I answered, trying not to give away too much. She stood up, came over, and gave me a big hug. Are you tired? She asked, her voice warm and friendly. I detected the faint scent of someone else's perfume, which only added to the allure of the moment. Yes, I am. I need to rest. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted my shirt. I knew I'd figure it out, but for now, she didn't need to know that I'd already figured it out. I went upstairs to the bedroom, leaving Grace in the kitchen. She was humming something to herself, but her voice sounded strained. At the bedroom door, I lingered, eager to eavesdrop. Footsteps. She went into the living room, and then, for a moment, there was silence. I went into the bedroom but didn't turn on the light, sinking down on the bed. I eagerly pulled out my phone and dialed Rick again through the encrypted line. Rick, I need a background check. Everything about Grace. Calls, emails, movements over the last 6 months. And find out who owns a car with these license plates. I enthusiastically dictated the number I remembered on the stalker's car. Got it, Mark. Are you sure you want to know all this? Rick paused, as if considering his next words carefully. It's about your personal life. This isn't my first time, Rick. You know me. You do what you're told, and you'll be fine. Hang in there, buddy. They'll figure it out. I disconnected the phone, slowly unclenching my fists. Even after all these years, I was still in the game. As they say, old habits die last. The next morning, I woke up surprisingly calm. Grace made breakfast as if nothing had happened, but I could sense that her smile was a mask. Did you have a good weekend? She asked, sitting down across from me at the table. It was, I said, catching her gaze. How are you doing? She asked, her voice full of warmth. I'm doing great. A little tired from work, she said, smiling, but not looking directly at me. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I opened a message from Rick. Asterisk, your wife is connected to the facility. Details on the calls. Meeting tonight. Caution advised. Asterisk, something cold clenched in my chest, but I tried not to show it. Are you going out tonight? I asked casually. Just in town. Marina and I have a meeting at a cafe, she answered, getting up to clear her plate. Great. Then I'll work from home. I have a little business to finish up. She gave me a nod and a kiss before taking off. When the door closed behind her, I sat down at my computer and started opening the saved files from the database I still had access to. Rick had sent me a list of her calls. One number repeated a few times, which was interesting. I recognized that number. It belonged to a man I'd worked with before I retired. His name was Alan. Alan was a troubleshooter, and I was excited to see what he was up to now. That evening, I met up with Rick in a quaint little pub on the outskirts of town. "This is even better than I thought," he said, handing me a folder of information. "Your Alan is doing some serious stuff. Apparently, he works for a private firm that specializes in eliminating inconvenient people. Your name has come up in their conversations several times in the last 3 weeks. They want me out because I know too much," I said, excitedly looking through the files. "And Grace?" She was dragged in. "It's possible they're trying to manipulate her, or maybe they're threatening her, but she's definitely hiding something. She had meetings with Alan. She was giving him something, or receiving." I closed the folder and looked at Rick. "They don't know I'm still the man I used to be." "Mark, are you going to tell her the truth?" "Not yet, but I'm going to use it." I jumped up, putting the folder under my jacket. "We'll have a plan, Rick. We always do." Grace entered the house late, her energy palpable in the air. Her coat still smelled like someone else's expensive perfume. She gave me a smile, though I could see her shoulders tensing and her fingers shaking as she tried to untie her scarf. "You're late," I said, sitting on the couch in the dark room. My voice was cold as steel. She flinched, taken aback by my presence. Marina wanted to talk. She had a rough day." I stood up slowly, tucking my phone into my pocket. "It's been a busy day." "That's convenient. You have a rough day every time I start asking questions." Grace frowned as she continued to take off her coat, but her hands were shaking. "Mark, what's with the tone? Do you suspect me?" I took a step forward, and her eyes darted toward the door, as if she expected to escape. "Suspicious? No. I already know everything." Her eyes widened, but she quickly regained her composure, trying to look confident. "What do you know, Mark? You're acting weird." "Alan, Grace. I know about Alan. I know how you met him at the restaurant. I know how you handed him papers. I know you lied to me while I was living under the same roof with you." She took a step back and shook her head. "Mark, you're misunderstanding." I hummed, pulling out my phone. A photo appeared on the screen. Grace was sitting at a table with Alan, an envelope in her hands. "Really? Then what was it? Were you the one who exchanged recipes? Maybe he taught you how to bake the most delicious pies." "Mark, it's not that easy to explain." "Damn it, Grace." I shouted, and she backed away, clutching the back of a chair with her hands. "This was your plan, wasn't it? You who decided I was a liability? Or did you just go along with it because he promised you a new life?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't let that stop me. "You lived with me for 20 years, Grace. And all that time, you thought I was just a regular guy, didn't you? A man who works tirelessly to provide you with a peaceful life." "Mark, I didn't mean—" "Shut up." I shouted so loudly that she froze. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I pulled a token out of my pocket and threw it on the table. The metal clattered against the surface. "Mark Grayson, intelligence agent, call sign, Phoenix." A retired man who now lives with a woman who decided to sell him for a pittance. Her lips quivered with excitement. She slumped in her chair like she had been hit, but she was ready to get back up again. You all this time, have you been lying to me? I leaned closer, looking her straight in the eye. I lied to protect you. And you, Grace, you sold me out. You betrayed me. For what? For his beautiful promises? Or was it out of fear that he would kill you? She tried to answer, but I interrupted her. No more excuses. You've crossed the line. And I promise you, Alan will soon realize that he underestimated me. And you. I stood up, ready to face the day, and made my way to the door. You'll soon discover the true meaning of living with someone you've betrayed. Her face showed a mix of shock and awe as I walked out of the room, leaving her in icy silence. I heard footsteps behind me. Grace wasn't going to let this conversation go. Is that a mark? You think you could just walk away with this nonsense? Her voice was full of energy, almost playful. You're out of your mind if you think you can just walk away with this. An intelligence agent? You, Mark. I stopped in the doorway and turned to her. Her face was contorted with rage, and I realized that her contempt was actually fear. You've always been a bit of a softie, she teased, taking a step closer to me. You've always used your sharp intellect to support my family, and your playful shenanigans have always kept us on our toes. You think you can scare me with those scouting tales? She snorted. Even now, you're not going to do anything. I didn't answer, just stared at her, feeling my inner calm wash over me. My years of training, the experience of dozens of operations, all of that now played a part. My stillness, my stare. It all seemed to hit her harder than any words could. She tried to continue, but stammered. Her lips quivered, and what she was trying to hide flashed in her eyes. Fear. Do you really think anyone would believe you? She whispered, her voice wavering slightly. You've always been a nobody. And now, I took a step toward her, and she backed away instinctively, nearly tripping over a chair. Grace, I said softly, as if tasting her name. You have no idea who you're living with. She stood, frozen, pressing herself against the back of the couch. You don't want to believe me? Okay. But when Alan disappears, and your friends realize they've messed with the wrong guy, you'll be the first to pay. Her breathing grew ragged, but she was still fighting to save face. You won't do anything, Mark, she said, smiling broadly. You can't. You're not the right person. I leaned in close to her ear, and she nearly shrieked when she heard my quiet, cold voice. You'll find out who I am. I strode out of the house, my heart pounding with excitement, and headed for my SUV. Grace stayed inside, but I could tell she was already shaking with fear. She wasn't in the mood for ridicule right now. In the car, I powered up my laptop and got ready to connect with my team using our secure encrypted communication system. Rick was on the line in an instant. Mark, what's wrong? Grace is here. She knows more than she's letting on. She's got nothing to fear from Alan, but she's got me figured out. I want you to find out who else is involved. You think she's part of a bigger plan? I bet she doesn't even know what she's gotten herself into. But I'm going to find out. Rick paused for a moment, then spoke with excitement. There's another problem. Alan has obtained information on your former subordinates. Some of them have already disappeared. I gripped the steering wheel. Someone leaked the data. Yeah, and it was someone who knew what they were doing. Find the leak, I ordered, and send me all the data. I came home that night as if nothing had happened. Grace was lying in bed, but I knew she was awake. Her labored breathing gave it away. Sleep well, Grace, I whispered, nuzzling her head. She didn't respond, but I could feel her shivering. The next day, I found out that Alan had made an appointment. He thought I would make the first move, but he didn't realize that he was already trapped by me. Alan showed up for the meeting. He was confident until he heard my voice behind him. You shouldn't have touched my family, Alan. He turned around, but instead of the horror I'd expected, I saw a playful smirk on his face. Mark, don't you get it? I'm not the one who's after you. It's her. Alan showed me a picture on his phone. It was a picture of Grace. She was beaming, standing next to a man I knew well, a former intelligence chief. My heart sank, but I also felt a surge of excitement. Welcome to the new game, Grayson, Alan said, putting the phone away. The rules have changed. I stood across from Alan, trying to absorb all the new information. Could Grace have been working against me all this time? Her smiles, her affectionate words. Could it be all a grand illusion? Are you saying my wife is working with you? I asked, my voice alive with excitement. Alan's grin widened as he took a step back. No, Mark. She's not with me. Work is so much more interesting. We're just on different sides of the board, you could say. I squinted, intrigued. You didn't realize it right away, did you? At that moment, my temples throbbed. I felt dizzy, as if someone had suddenly yanked the rug out from under me. I took a step back, steadying myself on a chair. Mark. Alan tilted his head like a predator spotting prey. Is something wrong? Go away, I mumbled, trying not to fall. But he didn't. His eyes were fixed on me, and I could tell he was expecting something. The world around me began to blur, and I slumped back in the chair. My heart was pounding like crazy. Mark, Alan shook his head. You need to trust your wife more. She knows how to finish what you started. I looked up, my eyes alight with anticipation. What did you do to me? Alan laughed. It wasn't me, my friend. Your Grace is a true master. She did it. Slowly. She was careful and deliberate. She doled out the small doses so you'd think it was just old age. I gritted my teeth, gathering the last of my strength. You're not going to succeed. I already have, he replied, turning and walking away. Good night, Mark. If you live to see the morning. I don't remember how I got out of the building, but I know I was ready for whatever might come next. The world shook like I was on the deck of a ship in a storm, and I loved it. My hands shook, my legs shook, but my instincts still worked. I activated the distress signal on the watch I'd worn since the beginning of my career. It was more than just an accessory. A second later, I got a call from Rick. Mark, what's going on? His voice was harsh. I've been poisoned. Grace, find me. I'm on my way. Hold on. I blacked out and settled to the ground, closing my eyes. When I woke up, the light was too bright for my eyes to adjust right away. The refreshing scent of alcohol and medicine filled the air. Rick's voice came from somewhere off to the side. Damn it, Mark. You almost died. Where am I? I tried to sit up. Rick was immediately beside me. You're in one of our clinics. We figured it out. She's been putting poison in your food and drink in small doses to make it look like chronic pain or age-related problems. I nodded. eager to absorb this incredible revelation. How long has it been going on? Apparently over a year. Maybe 2. I shook with rage. She knew what she was doing. She was waiting for me to become weak. Her plan backfired. We found you in time. But Mark, Rick stopped talking. This is just the beginning. Alan, he's gone. And Grace too. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger I hadn't felt in years. They both think they've won, but they don't even realize they just started a war. Lying in my hospital room, I stared at the ceiling, pondering. How long had she been planning this? Was Grace part of something bigger from the beginning, or was she recruited later? I trusted her, loved her, and she used that as a weapon against me. Deep inside, a feeling I'd buried long ago rose. The pain of betrayal mixed with cold determination. She wanted to weaken me, to make me helpless, but I'm stronger than that. But she forgot who I used to be, forgot that I know how to turn weakness into strength. I rose, my body protesting, but rising all the same. Mark, what are you doing? Rick was standing at the door. Getting back into the game, I said, putting on my old jacket. This is personal now. The next day, I was on my way. My goal was clear. Alan and Grace hadn't just betrayed me. They were part of something much bigger that had to be found out. Rick said there was only one person who could help me, and I knew right away who he was talking about. Mark, are you sure you want to get her involved? He asked, his voice full of anticipation as he walked me to the helicopter. She's the best, I replied, buckling my seatbelt. And if anyone knows how to clean up this mess, it's her. Okay, then. Here are her coordinates. Just remember, Mark, she'll go out of her way for you. Try not to forget that. I didn't say anything. I could feel something stirring within, an unknown excitement, but I didn't have time to ponder the past. Laura sat in a quaint cafe on the outskirts of Berlin, observing the bustling street below. She always chose such places, quiet, no fuss. She was a little over 40, but she looked younger than her years. Tall and slender, she moved with the poise of someone disciplined and self-assured. Her black hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, and she wore light makeup on her face, emphasizing her expressive green eyes. She looked the same as the last time we worked together, which was a relief. I walked over, and she noticed me right away. Her gaze softened, and the corners of her lips quivered in a warm, almost imperceptible smile. Mark, you always find me in the most unexpected places, she said, standing up and holding out her hand. Laura, I replied, shaking her hand. It's good to see you, I said, grinning. I'd say the same, but your appearance leaves a lot to be desired. What brought you out today? It's a long story, I laughed, sitting down across from her. Laura stared at me, her gaze sharp and attentive as always. Then tell the short version. I gave her a brief rundown of the situation, covering Grace, Alan, the poisoning, and their disappearance. Mark, this is serious, she said when I was done. That's why I'm here. You always had a way of seeing what I was missing. Laura leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Did you know that I always thought your wife wasn't worthy of you? I didn't say anything. So, what do you want me to do? Her tone shifted to businesslike. You know how Alan works. He has contacts we can use. We need to bring them to the surface. And Laura, I need support. She smiled, her eyes flashing with battlefield excitement. Mark Grayson is asking for support. That's something. I'm right there with you. We rented a small apartment in Berlin where we began to prepare. Laura worked with her usual smooth and quiet efficiency. She diligently collected data on Alan's movements and meetings, and found several promising leads on where he might be hiding. "This man is paranoid," she said, laying out the map on the table. "He's got 3 hideouts in different parts of the city, but one of them was activated yesterday. So he's here." I nodded, intrigued. "But there's something else you need to know. He's not just hiding. He's planning something." "Like what?" "I'm not sure exactly what he's planning, but his men have started moving toward the eastern border. It doesn't sound like running, more like preparing for something big." I thought about it, looking at the map. "Laura, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to help. I realize I'm dragging you into this." She looked at me with a slight chuckle. "Mark, you're always looking out for everyone else, never thinking about yourself. And to be honest, I would have done it even without you asking me to." I met her gaze, and she looked back at me. It was a rare moment when I felt something warm pierce my wall of cold rage and determination. But there was no time for emotion. "Okay," I said, turning back to the map. "Let's start with this hideout. We have work to do." On the 3rd day of our search, Laura, sitting at her laptop, suddenly called out to me, "Mark, you've got to see this." I hurried over to her, eager to see what she had found. On the screen was access to the encrypted data she had just hacked into. It was Grace and Alan's correspondence. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Alan wrote, "Absolutely. He thinks his chronic pain is just age. Mark has never been suspicious in that regard. They'll get it all done. The important thing is that you get these state papers ready, and those state awards he still has. They're worth millions." I froze. My awards aren't just valuable for their monetary worth. They were decorations earned for accomplishing the most difficult missions. Each one holds a piece of my heart. "She knew what she was doing," I muttered. "She was a classy actress. All this time, she'd been playing the role of loving wife to make me let my guard down." Laura's brow furrowed in intrigue. "Mark, she's clearly been planning this for a long time. There are more tapes here. They discuss how to move the money offshore after she gets access to your assets." I clenched my fists. She wanted to destroy everything I'd built. For what? For the money? Laura looked at me. "It's not just money, Mark. She sees you as a threat. You're not a person to her. You're an obstacle." I looked away, trying to take it all in. Meanwhile, Laura revealed another fascinating detail. "Mark, this isn't just about revenge. Alan has a bigger plan." She displayed a map on the screen. It showed key infrastructure, power lines, water intakes, and a chemical warehouse. "It's a network of facilities in Eastern Europe. I think Alan is preparing a major sabotage. If they blow up these points, the consequences will be catastrophic." "Is this a terrorist operation?" I asked, and a chill ran down my spine. Maybe. Or maybe it's an attempt at sabotage to create chaos. Either way, it's a huge scale. And Mark, he has support. There are just so many people involved. I let out a sigh, realizing the stakes were rising. "We can't let this happen." Laura nodded in agreement. "I've already contacted our contacts, but you'll have to be at the center of the operation." As we finished planning our first move that late night, Laura lingered by the window. I strolled over to her, intrigued by her focus on the nighttime cityscape. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. About how long it's been since we've worked together, she said, smiling. We've always been a good team, she replied. We have, I replied. She looked at me, and there was more than just friendly warmth in her gaze. Mark, I want you to know that I would do anything for you. You've always been more important to me than you realize. I was caught off guard. It was unexpected, but I couldn't help but feel that there was truth in her words that I'd ignored for too long. Laura, you don't have to say anything, she interrupted. Just know that I'm here to help you, even if it costs me everything. Her words reverberated deeply within me. Thank you, I said quietly. Laura and I had spent the night preparing for the operation. Alan had chosen one of his old hideouts in an abandoned industrial area. It was the perfect place for surveillance, smuggling, and preparing operations. We knew it wouldn't be an easy walk, but we were ready for the challenge. At dawn, we reached the grounds. The building was surrounded by a high metal fence, and armed men roamed the perimeter. Through the thermal imager, we counted at least 10 guards. They've done their homework, Laura said quietly as she lowered the device. It's clear that Alan recognizes your arrival, and he's ready for it. That only makes things more interesting, I said, checking my gear. We decided to go in through an old drainage tunnel that led to the basement. Laura led the way, her movements smooth and confident. She had always been an excellent agent, quick thinking, precise action, absolutely reliable. Once we're inside, the most important thing is to find Alan and his files, she said as we moved through the dark corridor. He's not just hiding. He's working on something big. I nodded in agreement, gripping the silenced pistol firmly in my hands. We came to a narrow staircase that led to the first floor. Laura stopped, gesturing for me to follow her. I knew she was ready to back me up at all costs. The first floor was bustling with crates of equipment and weapons. We moved nimbly between them until we heard voices. They start moving in 2 days, one of the guards said. Alan wants it to go off without a hitch. And if someone tries to interfere? Asked another, their voice brimming with anticipation. Alan said he has a plan for that. No one will be able to stop us. I looked at Laura, and she nodded. We emerged from hiding at the same time. With swift and precise movements, we fired 2 shots, and the guards collapsed to the floor. Quick and clean, she whispered, looking around the room. There were maps and documents on the table. I eagerly grabbed them, flipping through them. They're planning to attack chemical warehouses to create mass poisonings, I said, my voice alive with excitement. It's state-level sabotage. Laura's brow furrowed in concentration. We have to find Alan now. He's the key to everything. We hurried up to the second floor, where the control center was located. The door was ajar, and I heard a familiar voice. They're on their way. I can feel it, Alan said to someone. I gestured for Laura to get ready. We rushed inside at the same time. Mark, Alan said with a grin, looking at me. You came. I was just beginning to miss you. Cut the crap, Alan. You lost, I said, playfully pointing the gun at him. Nah, he replied, grinning. His eyes sparkled. I have all the leverage. All you have is anger. At that moment, Laura noticed that one of his men was moving toward her with a gun. She fired first, and the return shot knocked her back. Laura! I rushed to her, feeling everything inside me turn upside down. She was lying on the floor, breathing heavily. The shot had hit the vest, but it had hit her hard. I'm okay, she wheezed, her voice strong and determined. "Go get him, Mark," she said, her voice alive with determination. Alan seized the moment and ran out the back door. "Laura, stay here." "I'll be back," I said, meeting her gaze. "Mark, you're important to me," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Squeezing his hand, she added, "Thank you for being you." I nodded, feeling that simple acknowledgement go deeper than I'd expected. "I'll be back," I promised, and I rushed after Alan. The empty corridors echoed our hurried steps. Every stride brought a surge of pain, but it wasn't the wound itself that felt intense. It was the rush of thoughts that suddenly surged through the chaos. Laura's name echoed in my head, her presence a constant comfort and source of strength. She was always there for me, even when I didn't notice it. She'd always had my back, supported me, and done everything in her power to keep me going. Even after the shooting, she insisted that I keep going, that I finish what I'd started. In that moment, I realized that Laura was the one person who had always been loyal to me, to the end. She didn't do it for the praise or the position, but for something greater. She was there for me, and I couldn't have asked for a better friend. This profound respect and gratitude I felt for her almost made me stumble as I ran my eyes down the dark hallway. "You're better than I deserve, Laura. I won't let Alan win. I won't let everything we fought for be in vain." I stormed into the main hall, ready to face the world. In the center stood Grace, with a haughty smile on her face. She looked absolutely stunning. The black dress accentuated her figure. Her hair was perfectly styled, but her eyes, cold, prickly, gave everything away. "Well, hello, Mark," she said, her tone mocking. Alan stood beside her, his arms crossed over his chest, looking as cool as a cucumber. "Welcome, old friend. You took a while to get here." I slowly raised my gun, pointing it at Alan. "This is the end, Alan." He grinned, as if I'd said something funny. "Are you so sure, Mark? Look at you. You're pathetic. You've got nothing left to fight for." "Shut up," I hissed, shifting my gaze to Grace. "And you. I'm amazed at how I could have been so blind." She snorted, crossing her arms. "Blind, Mark? You've always been blind. Did you think your heroic actions and awards mattered? You're nothing. You were nothing. And with me, you became somebody. Is that what you call someone?" I asked, my voice alive with excitement. "Poisoning your own husband? For what, Grace? For money?" She laughed, high and mocking. "Money, power, everything you couldn't give me. You've always been a bit of a weakling, Mark. You never even saw me play with you, the way you ate from my hand." "You played," I said, looking into her eyes. "Do you think you won?" "I know I won," she said, stepping closer. "Look at you. A tired, pathetic old man who's still trying to play the hero." "That's enough," I exclaimed, my voice ringing with excitement. Her smile faded, but she continued anyway. "You should have left everything to me, Mark. I was your best chance. And now," I interrupted, clenching my fist, "you get nothing. No money. No money. No power. No money. No power. No respect. For me, you're nothing, Grace. Rotten. You're so greedy. Cowardly." She paused for a moment, then looked directly at Alan. "Kill him, Alan. Now." Alan raised his gun, but I was faster. One shot, and his gun flew out of his hands. He cried out in pain, clutching his wounded arm. "Mark," he began, but I had already stepped toward him, putting the gun to his forehead. "You've lost, Alan. You won't do it," he wheezed. "You won't stop me," I said, glaring at Grace. She backed away, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Grace realized the situation was getting out of control. Her face contorted as I stepped closer, and she spun around, lunging for the door. "You're not going to get far," I said, grinning. I dropped Alan to the floor with a knee strike. He let out a pained groan but remained down, cradling his injured arm. Grace took off, her high heels clicking on the metal stairs. I caught up with her at the exit, grabbing her arm. "Let go of me," she screamed, trying to get away. "No, Grace. You stay. We're going to do this so that everyone can see who you really are." She tried to hit me, but I intercepted her arm, forcibly turning her toward me. "You've always been so strong, Grace. You think money and power can hide that? No. Now, everyone will know who you are." I dragged her back to Alan. He tried to get up, but he fell to one knee, cursing me. "Mark, you're not going to get anywhere with this," he wheezed. "I will accomplish one thing, Alan," I replied, my voice firm. "They'll see what a traitor looks like." Grace screamed and tried to break free as I began to bind her together with Alan. Mark, you've never been like this before," she screamed, yanking her arms. But the ropes were already tight around her wrists. Alan lashed out furiously, but each gesture only made the knots tighter. "Mark, you're a legend," he hissed, looking up at me. I grinned, testing the strength of the bindings. "Damn," I repeated in a mocking tone, "Alan. Don't you get it yet? You brought this on yourself." When they were both bound, I dragged them over to a massive metal hook hanging from the ceiling. A few minutes later, they were hanging in a playful position. Alan was tied to the rope with his head to the ceiling, and Grace was tied to him upside down, her face against his groin. Both were half naked, which made the sight even more ridiculous. "You're crazy," Grace gasped as I pulled them higher. "Maybe," I replied calmly, pulling her hair away from her angry face. "But you know, Grace, that's nothing compared to how rotten you turned out to be." Alan's raspy voice only added to the hilarity, making the whole scene even more entertaining. "Marky, you," he started, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Alan, I'd hold my breath if I were you. Your ally isn't going to help you anytime soon." I pulled out a can of spray paint and wrote in large block letters on the wall above them, "The fate of traitors is always humiliating." I stepped back to take in the view, and my eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Mark, let's go. You're going to pay for this." Grace squealed again, but her voice was almost hysterical. "You know, Grace, you're right. I have paid for it all with years of lies, betrayal, and pain. Now, it's your turn." I turned on the beacon on my watch, letting the agents know where to find them. As I departed, I heard Grace's excited screams fade into the background, while Alan remained silent, occasionally emitting soft moans. When the operatives arrived, one of them, noticing the scene, whistled. "Now that's art, Grayson. You're certainly a master of epilogues." The other agent laughed, taking a picture of the writing on the wall. "I'm sure this will be a talking point in the report." I remained silent, only casting one last glance at the two traitors who now dangled like puppets in a theater of the absurd. Outside, I paused, looking up at the sky, which was gradually brightening. This is the end for them, I thought, feeling a sense of excitement. But not for me. For me, it's a new stage. This time, I know exactly who's beside me. Laura was waiting for me by the car, her face radiating anticipation. Her eyes conveyed concern, but when I approached, she smiled. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded enthusiastically. Now, it's just beginning. After the operation, I spent months piecing together the aftermath. The documents Laura and I had recovered from Alan's safe house turned out to be key. They contained information on corruption schemes, international connections, and even plans for state-level sabotage. I handed it all over to the appropriate agencies, but made sure to keep some of the details under wraps. With that, Alan and his network were completely destroyed, unable to be rebuilt. Meanwhile, Grace found herself on the other side of the law. She was arrested for attempted murder, financial fraud, and complicity in terrorism. She was sentenced to life in prison. Alan, by then broken and disgraced, agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. His life was certainly ruined, but he was able to make the most of the situation. After these events, my life changed. Laura and I became closer than ever. We settled in a quaint little house just outside of town. Laura had always dreamed of a quiet life, and I realized I wanted the same. Her love of plants turned out to be a true art form. She would spend hours in the garden, creating amazing arrangements that were like little corners of paradise. I'd find her hard at work in the soil, sometimes dirty but always happy and smiling. "Do you ever rest?" I asked her. I asked her once, watching her plant new flowers. "This is my rest, Mark," she replied, shaking off her hands. "And you? When are you going to start enjoying life?" "I think I've already started," I answered, sitting down next to her. We spent evenings together, talking by the fireplace. Laura was an incredible conversationalist, intelligent, kind, with a fantastic sense of humor. Her optimistic view of the world and her unwavering belief in the best in people were truly inspiring. "You changed my life," I said one day as we were looking at the stars. "You did too, Mark," she replied. "I think we just found each other at the right time," I said. We became a team, united in our mission to make a difference in the lives of others. Together, we created a small charity that helped people who were victims of crimes like the one that ruined my life. Our home became a place of warmth, joy, and understanding. Laura continued to tend the garden, and I learned to appreciate every minute I spent with her. We proved that even after betrayal and pain, it is possible to find love, happiness, and meaning. Above all, we remained true to our values and never lost faith in the goodness of people. Every conversation, every evening spent together, was a testament to the power of love and the beauty of connection. It was a reminder that I was finally home,